Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, we have old viruses reemerging, war once again on the horizon, and you think in this day and age that the wealth will be evenly distributed among the working class. Well, that's not so. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the sanctions being lifted from Iran. Well, these are just a few of the things that we'll be reporting on in today's broadcast. But first off, the World Health Organization is warning that the Zika virus, a virus spread by mosquitoes, could infect millions of people. Although it's been mostly prevalent in South and Central America, it's starting to take a strong foothold. Of course, that's the fear anyway in the United States. Well, so far, 31 cases have been reported in 11 states and Washington, D.C., and scientists say that the virus is exploding in Central and South America.
CBS's chief medical correspondent John LaPook said the Zika virus could infect 4 million people worldwide. Now, symptoms include fever, rash, joint pain, and conjunctivitis, which is the pink eye. Now, however, 4 in 5 people infected with the virus don't have any symptoms.
Right, interesting. Well, at this time, there is no treatment for or vaccines for the Zika virus. Dozens of Americans have tested positive for the virus after traveling abroad in South America. Although there are Americans infected with the virus, has been reported, there's no evidence that any of those infections originated from mosquitoes in the United States.
Now, the virus is especially dangerous to pregnant women, causing microcephaly, a disorder in which the head and brain are too small. Now, Zika was detected first in Brazil in 2015, and from there it quickly spread throughout the South and Central America and the Caribbean. Now, the CDC says that the mosquitoes capable of carrying the Zika virus exist in the U.S., and according to the NIH, a vaccine could take years to develop to fight the disease.
Well, a little bit too late at that point. Of course, I understand that they're calling that in South America a shrunken head disease because it causes that the heads and the brains to be so small in newborns. Well, the water crisis in Flint, Michigan is an ongoing uphill battle for both its residents and the local government. So far, at least 100 children have shown excessive levels of lead in their blood, and the governor of Michigan is saying that those numbers are, of course, expected to rise.
Now, the cause? Well, for a year and a half, the city failed to treat the water with an anti-corrosion additive, and as a result, the pipes corroded, releasing the lead. Now, protesters picketed outside the state capitol building, demanding the state governor, Rick Snyder, resign, while inside the capitol, he was actually apologizing for the catastrophe.
At the meeting in the Capitol, in his formal apology, he said, "Government has failed you, federal, state, and local leaders, by breaking the trust you placed in us." Snyder also blamed the agencies responsible due to gross oversight. He continued, "In situations like these, they must get to my desk immediately. No excuses, no delay, period."
He also said that the Michigan Environmental Quality Agency and the EPA didn't address the seriousness when lead poisoning was discovered in 2015. Residents with corrosive pipes are nervous. Several class action lawsuits are aimed at the governor at this time. Now, the latest of which will prevent people's water from being shut off for not paying their bills. So some people are refusing to pay their bills until the problem is corrected, resulting in the lawsuits and so forth.
Yeah, because they probably figure, well, we can't use the water, so why should we pay for water that's actually poisoning the people? Well, currently more than 100 National Guard members are being deployed to the city to aid with relief, and the president is pledging $5 million for relief after meeting with the city's mayor. Well, President Obama said this is an indication that sometimes we downplay the role that an effective government has to play in protecting the public health and safety of people.
The water became contaminated after a change of supplier in 2014 when lead leached from old pipes. Now, since then, residents in Flint, Michigan have been experiencing health issues. The residents in Flint, Michigan are receiving bottled water, but they say it's not enough, and they're asking their state for $29 million in aid.
Well, until then, residents are wondering how and when they'll get access to clean water, one of life's basic necessities.
Well, for the last 76 days, a leaking gas well in Los Angeles is flooding a local city with overwhelming amounts of methane gas. 2,000 people have been evacuated as a Southern California gas company is struggling to stop the flow. Now, the gas leak is spewing 70,000 pounds of gas every hour into Southern California neighborhoods less than 2 miles away from the leaky gas well.
Man, that's bad. Aaron Brockovich, an environmental activist, called this a BP oil spill on land. A new study conducted by a legal firm suing the company says that gas from the leak is now reaching a Porter Ranch community at least 18 hours a day. Now, the source of the leak is a hole in a 62-year-old pipe.
Southern California Gas Chief Operating Officer Brett Lane publicly apologized for the leak and assured residents that they were doing everything they can to stop the nuisance. Now, in order to stop the leak, the company has to drill down 8,000 feet using a relief well to intercept the leaky pipe and plug it up. Now, the gas company estimates that process, Gatan, is going to take possibly up till April.
So at least another 3 months or so. Well, in the hills of the area where the leaky pipe is, there are 115 gas wells. And of those 115 gas wells, only 10 have safety valve shutoffs.
Well, one of the men occupying an Oregon wildlife refuge was fatally shot by authorities. The video was released by the FBI showing the fatal moments, and the events that led up to the shooting. Arizona rancher Robert Finnegan acted as the spokesperson for the occupiers of the Now Here Animal Wildlife Refuge and was one of several people stopped by the FBI outside of the refuge.
Well, after trying to evade authorities after a traffic stop, the car he was driving veered off the road and nearly hit a police vehicle. Finnegan got out of the vehicle with his hands up, and at some point he reaches for his waistband and was shot dead by officials. The FBI said he was armed. Now, the FBI also announced that one more militia member surrendered, but 4 more are still holed up in the refuge.
The remaining members released a video that said they want to go home, but one of the members is facing federal charges, and the other 3 have vowed to stay there with him until the government drops those charges. So, Catan, the standoff continues.
So it goes. Wow, interesting. Well, France is in the news once again as the country is in a state of economic and a social emergency as they struggle with high unemployment and stagnant growth. President François Hollande said, "I believe with global uncertainty and persistent unemployment, we must also announce a state of social and economic emergency. I am disappointed as growth remains too slow."
France is warning Israel that Paris will recognize a Palestinian state if peace talks to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict do not make progress. Now, the French Foreign Minister, Laurent Fabius, said that France has a responsibility as a permanent member of the UN Security Council to keep up efforts to find a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine. He also noted that France will prepare for an international conference to bring together Israeli and Palestinian sides.
Now, senior U.S. officials said that President Obama's administration is aware of the French foreign minister's comments and added that Washington will not speculate about the proposed conference. Well, several countries such as the UK, France, Spain, Ireland, Belgium, and Portugal have recognized Palestine symbolically.
Sweden, however, officially recognized Palestine 2 years ago, and in 2012, the UN General Assembly agreed to upgrade the status of the Palestinians to that of a non-member observer state.
Interesting. Well, speaking on the subject of recognition, it is a recognized fact that the majority of the world's wealth resides in the hands of a small few. That inequality is making headlines this week, and for more on that story and several others, we now turn over to Larry McGee. Larry, just how big is this gap?
The global inequity with respect to the world's wealth is increasing, with analysts at this point calling it extreme. 62 people are reported to possess as much wealth as the poorest half of the Earth's population combined. Just 5 years ago, it took the holdings of 388 of the world's richest people to produce that same figure, but that number is now significantly decreased to well beneath 100. A report recently released by Oxfam entitled An Economy for the 1% places a spotlight on the growing breach between the haves and the have-nots. Among the report's findings are the world's richest 1% possessing more wealth than all of the Earth's people. That wealth is said to have increased by $500 billion between 2010 and 2015, while the wealth of the bottom half of the world's population is reported to have decreased by over $1 trillion during that same time period. Also shaking things up this week, North Korea is alleged to have conducted a nuclear test which produced an earthquake measuring 5.1 in magnitude. South Korea has described the quake as man-made, followed by Japan, who called it a possible nuclear test, and China, who voiced their suspicion that it was an explosion. North Korea is also asserting that it utilized a hydrogen bomb in the test, which was small enough to fit on a missile. But that assertion, analysts say, is doubtful, but would nonetheless represent a noteworthy accomplishment in engineering were it to be true. American aircraft flying out of Japan have been given the assignment of collecting air samples to accurately determine exactly what sort of device was detonated. But already, however, after analyzing the seismic waves produced by the blast, the U.S. is said to be skeptical of the idea that it was hydrogen-based, thinking it to have instead been an atomic bomb about half the size of the device used to destroy Nagasaki and Hiroshima. A hydrogen bomb is approximately 50 to 100 times more destructive than an A-bomb, but the U.S.'s main concern is said to be whether or not Pyongyang has the missile technology to launch any sort of a device into the U.S. For that possibility, as America is reported to be relying on its missile shield, which it says is capable of shooting down a small number of Korean missiles. That system is reportedly being kept at the ready for the North Koreans, who surprised everyone this week, including U.S. intelligence, who figured that another nuclear test was coming, but had no warning that it would take place this week. With all of its devastating effects, the decision to launch and engage in nuclear warfare would have to emanate from political madmen. And on that subject, President Obama, in a casual interview with Jerry Seinfeld this week, had this to say.
How many world leaders do you think are just completely out of their mind?
A pretty sizable percentage.
Some of these people, you must meet them, you must be chatting, and you see in the eyes, you look in the eyes, you go, oh, yeah, this guy's gone.
Yeah. Well, and part of what happens is these guys, I think the longer they stay in office, the more likely that is to happen.
Of course.
Right.
They lose it.
Yeah. I mean, you just, at a certain point, your feet hurt and you have absolute power and...
Privilege is toxic.
Yeah.
Sadly.
It really is.
Sadly. Things that people struggle to achieve.
Yeah.
They get to positions of power, influence, money, can do things.
Right.
It has a toxic effect on their judgment.
Yes. Has that happened to you yet?
On a note equally as serious, though without the humor, the president also spoke out this week on the gun violence plaguing the nation. The president punctuated his speech this week by saying, "We are the only advanced country on earth that sees this kind of mass violence erupt with this kind of frequency." While the president spoke, the ticker for gun violence and death continued ticking away in Chicago, with 9 shot and 4 dead by the day's end. There were 46 shootings and 10 murders within the first 5 days of 2016 in the Windy City. And despite Illinois having some of the toughest gun laws in the nation, the president says people are dying and the constant excuses for inaction no longer do. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Wow, definitely a rough start for Chicago. All those murders in just a few opening weeks there in the new year.
I would expect that would be very scary for its residents.
Well, for 60 years now, the Bundeswehr, Germany's army, has been protecting the German people from external threats and natural disasters. While some Germans strongly support their troops, there is a growing number of critics at home. Now, this is largely due to the army intensifying its recruiting efforts, mainly in the classroom. Those in opposition are calling it war propaganda.
Until the 1990s, Germany's military was largely restricted to operations inside their own borders. However, the war in Kosovo and more prominently the Afghanistan war changed all that. Germany is now involved in many other military operations around the world, but to maintain its strength, it needs 15,000 new recruits each year. So it's been turning to schools to make up those numbers.
Well, that's seen a backlash from groups who don't think the classroom is the place for recruitment. Now, one peace camp, a message written on the side of their tents, explains their stance. Now, the German message translated says, "Imagine if there's a war and nobody turns up to fight." Now, their message is a simple solution to ending war. If you don't join the military, if you don't engage the militarization, then there can be no wars in the future.
That actually sounds like a very great idea. No
Absolutely.
more wars. Well, U.S. Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter spoke at a joint press conference in Paris with his French counterpart. Mr. Carter indicated they and the 5 nations they met with will work together to counter the ISIL military campaign. The 5 members that took part in the talks along with the U.S. and France were Australia, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. During the press conference, Carter outlined 3 main objectives the U.S. has for accelerating the campaign against the Islamic State. Let's listen to what he had to say.
The 3 key objectives of the counter-ISIL military campaign are, first, to destroy the ISIL cancer's parent tumor in Iraq and Syria by collapsing its 2 power centers in Raqqa and Mosul. Second, to combat the metastases of the ISIL tumor worldwide. And third, to protect our people at home. So today we had a productive conversation with our coalition partners these members who are already making strong contributions and who share our determination to accelerate the campaign. This discussion provided an opportunity for us ministers to align our views on the capabilities needed to prosecute and indeed accelerate the campaign, both military and non-military. We agreed that we all must do more. And I'd also like to announce that I've invited defense ministers from all 26 counter-ISIL military coalition nations, plus Iraq, to convene in Brussels in 3 weeks for a first ever discussion among coalition defense ministers to discuss the opportunities that they and we have before us and must seize to hasten ISIL's lasting defeat.
Well, Russia may soon no longer be the only foreign force operating from a base inside Syria. Now, there are reports coming in that the U.S. has specialists in the northeast of the country working to rebuild an abandoned airbase. The territory is controlled by the Syrian Kurds, called the YPG or SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces.
When officials from the fighting group were questioned by journalists, they were reluctant to admit that something was being constructed in the area, at first even denying any knowledge of it. But eventually, and only indirectly, did they recognize that some work was being done on an airbase or something like that.
In an effort to confirm the reports, the Pentagon was questioned by different news media. One spokesman told Russia Today, "We don't have anything to provide regarding the reports at this time," while earlier the same Pentagon official firmly rejected the allegations to other journalists. Now, however, there is much speculation over the fact that the U.S. is working very closely with the Kurds against Islamic State.
Now, it's been reported that the United States is supplying the SDF with ammunition and various military gear. They are also carrying out airstrikes on behalf of the Syrian Kurds, even allowing them to direct the airstrikes. There is even photographs of U.S. Special Forces embedded with the SDF on the ground.
Well, all of this leaves no doubt that the Kurds would grant the U.S. permission to construct the airbase. However, there is no indication that permission was asked of the Syrian government, and that would make constructing this airbase, Katan, potentially a violation of Syrian sovereignty.
Overstepping the bounds there. Well, meanwhile, south of Syria, the UK and US have been selling arms to Saudi Arabia, but they may be in a breach of international law in Yemen. David Cameron has been accused of silently taking Britain into a brutal war in Yemen via Saudi Arabia. But why is the UK so adamant in supporting Saudi Arabia, including through arms sales? And what is the United States' involvement?
The Yemeni people have experienced horrible destruction as Saudi warplanes target multiple locations across the country. Now, Saudi jets bombed hospitals, schools, and residential areas with total disregard for civilian lives. But it is the U.S. and the UK's arms deals with Saudi Arabia which actually gives the rise to Riyadh's relentless aggression against Yemen.
Sure. Well, official figures reveal in just 3 months last summer, the British government approved the sale of £1 billion worth of bombs, missiles, and rockets to the Saudi capital. Coincidentally, there was a big surge in Saudi airstrikes on Yemen at the same time. Well, reports also show that the U.S. has also sold Saudi Arabia arms and military hardware and even weapons that have been banned, such as cluster bombs.
The Saudi Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir recently revealed that British and American officials are in command and control center of Saudi airstrikes on Yemen. They also have access to the list of targets. Now, the foreign minister adds, however, that they have no role in choosing them. Other reports indicate that the British forces in Yemen that there are some British forces in Yemen assisting the Saudis on the ground.
Interesting. Finally, we focus on Iran. For 10 years, the country was economically hit with multiple sanctions imposed on them by the United States and European nations. But those sanctions on oil and finances were officially lifted on January 16, 2016.
Well, roughly $100 billion in assets were also released after international inspectors concluded that the country had followed through on promises to dismantle large sections of its nuclear program. Now let's watch as the EU Foreign Policy Chief, Federica Mogherini, reads the official document lifting the long-imposed sanctions.
Today, we have achieved implementation day of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Ever since adoption day, we worked hard and showed mutual commitment and collective will to finally bring the JCPOA to implementation. Today, almost exactly 6 months after finalization of the historic deal, the International Atomic Energy Agency has verified that Iran has implemented its nuclear-related commitments under the JCPOA. As Iran has fulfilled its commitments, Today, multilateral and national economic and financial sanctions related to Iran's nuclear program are lifted in accordance with the JCPOA. The EU and the E3+3 countries, consisting in People's Republic of China, the Republic of France, the Federal Republic of Germany, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America and Iran, will also cooperate in the field of peaceful uses of nuclear energy in the framework of the JCPOA. UN sanctions related to Iran's nuclear program are lifted. United Nations Security Council Resolution 2231 of 2015, which endorsed the JCPOA, will from now onwards, together with the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, be the sole international legal framework related to Iran's nuclear activities. 1696 of 2006, 1696 of 2006, 1737 of 2007, 1737 of 2007, 1747 of 2007, 1803 of 2008, 1835 of 2008, 1929 of 2010, and 2224 of 2015.
Well, just 10 days after the sanctions were lifted, the president of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, traveled to Italy to meet with the Italian president and prime minister, and then went on to hold a meeting with Italian entrepreneurs and finally an appointment with Pope Francis. Now, the trip was part of his European tour, which will continue with a visit to France.
Upon touching down in Rome, Italian firms had business agreements ready for the Iranian president to sign worth between 15 and 17 billion euros. Our Italian pipeline companies' shareholdings surged 18.5% on the Milan Stock Exchange the very same day as a 500 billion euro deal between Rome and Tehran was announced.
Interesting. On his second day in the Italian capital, he attended a business forum. The forum was organized by the powerful Association of Italian Industries, Confindustria. The initiative was also joined by the Iranian oil minister and other officials, as well as over 100 Iranian business persons. They came to discuss business opportunities with Italian companies in attendance.
At the conference, President Rouhani addressed 500 entrepreneurs on the wide range of opportunities and benefits Italian firms would have in Iran. He said, "Iranians know Italy and how Italians work. They trust Italians. We must engage in a win-win economic collaboration." He continued, "Iran is currently the safest and most stable country in the entire Middle East, and it is open to foreign investors after years of sanctions." Now, the Italians, Gatan, they seem to be impressed with his words.
Well, to end his 2 days in Italy, President Rouhani visited Vatican City for talks with Pope Francis. The two held a private meeting, and according to those with him, President Rouhani was pleased to meet the pontiff and wished him well on his work. The 120-strong delegation of Iranian high-ranking officials and entrepreneurs left Italy for Paris to continue on with the second leg of their European tour.
Well, we'll see what else their tour brings about.
That's right.
Well, we end our broadcast today reminding you of the latest and greatest Bible study tool on the market, the Israel Says program. Simple enough that a child could use, yet sophisticated enough that questions mankind has posed for centuries are revealed. Any topic you can think of, type in the search bar and behold the knowledge of the Israel Says program.
And while you're searching the Israel Says program, don't forget to contact the House of Yahweh and request your free monthly newsletter and prophetic word magazine. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494 or visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also check out our new website at www.ypnnews.com. And to email the House of Yahweh, send your emails to info@yahweh.com. And for any calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen. And don't forget the Yisrael Says website at www.yisraelsays.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another enlightening message from Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.